Well, Eve Rosemary, welcome to Power and Witness. And we shot a couple of shows with you this afternoon, so I thought we'd cover some material we didn't get to and on the show of Life on the Rock. And one is that you have a list of favorite saints on your website, and I think pretty far at the top was Saint Rita, was it?
She is, yes. She's one of my favorites. Saint Rita is the patron of impossible cases, and throughout the last 4 years or so, I've had some just different health challenges, and had lots of doctors who just don't quite know what to do. So I joke like, oh, I'm an impossible case, so she's my patron.
Right.
So I really loved Saint Rita. She's also ended up popping up in my life a lot, kind of sporadically around the time that I was struggling initially with these health challenges, that I started reading a book about Mother Angelica, whose name was Rita before she entered the convent. And so I saw the name there. I started looking for patron saints when I was struggling with some of these health challenges, and Saint Rita popped up, and I was like, oh, Rita, I just read about her. The name Rita was on my list of like baby names for the future someday. So I was like, oh, she just kind of keeps popping up. And then I studied abroad in Florence, and Saint Rita's from Italy, and she was everywhere. And it became so well known actually in my study abroad group that I went with, that anytime anyone saw anything about Saint Rita, immediately they came and grabbed me to come show me. So it was really sweet.
Yeah. You did like a semester abroad?
I did, yes, in Florence. Benedictine, where I went to college, does a Florence program, so I was able to go there and go to Rome as well.
Yeah. And what did you think of Florence?
I liked Florence. Honestly, for being someone who studied abroad in Florence, I don't feel like I saw a lot of Florence, because every weekend, we had 3-day weekends, so I would go to a new city every single weekend when I could. So Florence, I was able to go around a little bit, but it was kind of more of a home base in my view. And then the rest of Italy, and then Switzerland, Spain, France were some of the other places that I got to then go out to on the weekends.
Oh, that's great. And so what did you learn about Saint Rita that you really liked? I mean, she had a difficult marriage, right? And so she had some tough stuff to go through, right? The loss of her sons, I think.
Yes. So she's a woman who lived every single walk of life, essentially, because, you know, she lived as a young person, as a single woman, then she got married, and then she was a widow, then she lost her sons, and then she entered the convent. So she has lived pretty much every single walk of life, and I just admire so much her ability to handle those difficulties and those adversities. She was also known as a peacemaker in her village. She grew up as the daughter of 2 peacemakers. That was their role in society, and that ended up being a large part of her story to enter the convent. She had to resolve this family feud. Actually, the people who had murdered her husband, one of their relatives was in the convent she wanted to enter into. And so then she had to go and resolve this conflict between the families, a generations-long conflict, mind you. And at that time, that was a really big deal for them. And she was able to resolve it, and then was able to enter the convent as a result. And in this time of trying to keep the peace and negotiate this peace, she was also asking for intercession from 3 of her favorite saints. And the story goes that the day that she entered the convent, these 3 saints carried her, and like she levitated, and she was carried by her 3 patron saints into the convent.
Yeah. And wasn't the marriage like kind of a forced arranged marriage, or?
Yes, it was, by the parents, because they were peacekeepers in their village. They knew the different walks of life, and they weren't trying to be mean to Saint Rita at the time. It was just that they wanted what was best for their daughter, I think, and that she would be better off getting married in that culture. That's something I learned actually at there's the National Shrine of Saint Rita in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I was able to visit that a couple months ago, and they were able to share some of those kind of insider reflections and details about her life. And then they talked about the marriage, and just that it wasn't any malice on the parents, and they just knew that the best, most peaceful option for Saint Rita would be marriage at that time.
Yeah. Was it like the 2 families that were feuding? Like from Rita, was it Rita's family that was feuding, or 2 outside?
It was her husband's family, and then another family that were feuding that she had to resolve.
All right. And then even in the convent, though, right? She had some opposition and difficulties, didn't she? That I remember she had this like a thorn in her forehead, right? But,
Yes, she did receive the
uh-huh.
stigmata a couple of the years into her life in the convent. And it's interesting because she faced a lot of suffering in her life, and she just wanted to suffer for Jesus, and he gave her the stigmata. And it was just one thorn. Supposedly, though, that one wound smelled really bad. There's like a rumor that it smelled really bad, that the sisters didn't want to be around her, people didn't want to be around her. And then it was one of her patron saints. I can't remember which one, but I think they must not have been saints. There's something in the story I might be missing where there's like a canonization or an event that she wanted to go to, and the sisters were so worried about how bad the wound smelled that she wouldn't be able to go. So she asked Jesus just for that one day, if the wound could go away, the stigmata. She was asking for the stigmata of all things to go away just for one day.
Right.
And supposedly the wound went away for one day so she could attend the canonization.
Oh, wow. And there's something about bees, wasn't there? Like
yes, she when she was born, I think as a baby, bees went into her mouth or something.
Oh, really?
Like that. There was something like, but they didn't sting her. It was like a miracle. Yeah. And I think the bees symbolized something there that then made more sense in the future. I can't quite remember that detail, but it's funny. It's like all these stories, and it's interesting too because Saint Rita was from like many, many, many years ago. We don't have any writings from her. All we have are stories from other people. So isn't it funny how we just like kind of know all these things about this person? I mean, she really just lived a contemplative life. She didn't go out and do things. Yeah. And I think that's something I love about her too, is we don't have these big institutions that she built. We don't have her diary to read. It's just stories from other people and the impact that she made on others. That's what we remember her by.
Yeah. And then you also on your list was Therese, right?
Yes.
Tell us about what inspired you about her.
She's my confirmation saint. She's actually the first saint I remember ever learning about. We did the novena to her when I was in 2nd grade, and I just remember learning about the saint that you get roses from. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I pray to anyone to get some flowers. Like, that sounds great. So she was a 2nd grader, but I remember doing it, but I never remembered who the saint was. And then my sophomore year of high school, my theology teacher, it was her feast day. And so she talked about Saint Therese, and that's where I made the connection of the roses and like all these memories from 2nd grade Eve, remembering the roses. And then from there, I just kind of learned about her little way of doing things, her life as someone who just chose to love God day in and day out. And I read the story of a soul and was really touched by just her way of living and loving other people, and her humility especially. I remember one story in particular where she was cleaning something, doing something, and one of the sisters accused her of like, oh, like, sister, why didn't you do the windows or like wash the windows or whatever it was? And that wasn't her job for the day, but she just said, oh, sorry, and washed the windows. Like, took the blame herself. And that's always stuck with me, just that deep humility that I would never think to do that, but I really I hope one day I can work towards, being that humble that I think of those things and that becomes second nature.
And it seems doable, right? She's talking about things. I remember, isn't there something too about the lamps up on the shelf that some were chipped, and she liked the pretty things, and but she would choose the one that was chipped or not quite as pretty as the other ones. And there's just all these little things we can do that are hidden, that are contradicting our self-will or contradicting our pride or something, or way we want it. And so she makes holiness seem within reach, doesn't she?
She does. And actually, it made me think of a story I heard at the St. Therese of Lisieux shrine in Rhode Island, which I was going on with the shrine tour, kind of how I mentioned the St. Rita shrine. And at the St. Therese of Lisieux shrine, I heard this story where when she was a little girl, she she was over at like a friend's house, and they gave her 2 cookies when she left. And so St. Therese was like, oh great, 2 cookies, one for my sister and one for me. And she was on the train home, waiting for the train to go home, and she accidentally dropped one of the cookies. And she goes, oh no, my sister's cookie has fallen. And really the story goes that she's like, why was it my sister's cookie that fell on the ground and not mine? Because I always think of others first. Isn't it just funny? It's so human. Like again, kind of what you were saying. It's real. It feels a lot more real. And I just love those stories of sainthood that make things feel a lot closer, a lot more real.
Yeah. And I've come to realize too, the older priests would always preach on these kind of issues, but like when you get older, the pains and sufferings of that, big sacrifices, if you live long enough, are coming, right? You're going to have hard things, right, with health and all that kind of stuff. So, don't worry, there'll be big opportunities to suffer, right? But all along the way, we can grow in maybe these small things, but also you have St. Clare on your list.
I do.
Now, why her?
St. Clare of Assisi is someone that I discovered when I was studying abroad. We went to Assisi, and so I got to see her there. You can go in and see her. And that, at first, I was actually really against St. Clare for some reason. I was there and I was like, St. Clare, she just seems like she was like fangirling over St. Francis of Assisi. Well, I didn't understand what she was known for. And then I heard the story about her devotion to the Eucharist in particular, and how she held it up as, the city was kind of about to be demolished, and held up the Eucharist and saved thousands of people as a result. And I was really just impacted by her trust in Jesus. And I have grown in deep devotion for the Eucharist as well. So just hearing that, I felt like really resonated.
Yeah, and St. Francis would say that she lived the vows better than he did.
She was I've learned since, she was very courageous, very brave, just had a way of living that was like, she didn't look back. She just full force throttle, ready to go.
Yeah. And much of it sick, in the convent. So she's the patroness of television, right?
Yes, she is, because she was able to watch, was it St. Francis's speech or something?
I think it was like a midnight mass or something, or Christmas or something. Yeah, she could
right
see
before
it,
television was even
ever
a thought.
Saw it on the wall, And St. Joseph's on your list. They're special saints. Now, why is he there?
He's someone that I grew in devotion to in college, largely. He was just I never thought about him before. He's kind of pushed aside at the Holy Family, and I started learning a lot more about him when I got to college during March especially. That's when his feast day is, and all of a sudden I started seeing him, and then all of a sudden I realized that he's in pretty much every single church. I never even had realized that before, that he was so significant. And then I just started reflecting a little bit more on his life and the way that just thinking about how he would have loved Mary and Jesus, and like this great example about how to love both of them, just how we're called to love both of them as well. His humility, his deep humility. I mean, just imagine being St. Joseph, and if anything goes wrong in the Holy Family, well, there's only really one person to blame. It can't be Jesus. It can't be the Immaculate Conception. Here we are with St. Joseph. It's like, darn, here I go again. I can just imagine the sanctification that happened in his life because he was surrounded by Mary and Jesus. And I remember kind of going back to studying abroad, a popular topic during this conversation, that I got to see the painting of the engagement of St. Joseph and Mary. And I just thought about like how gentle he was, how much he would have purely loved her, and especially as a chastity speaker. St. Joseph is definitely someone that I turn to as an example. I also try to give him as an example to young men that I'm speaking to, because obviously I can't quite offer them the same advice, but it's like, go to Joseph. That's what Scripture tells us even to do or points to is like, go to Joseph.
Right.
Ask him how to be more of a man. I mean, he knew how to protect Mary, to take care of her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think men sometimes can find it difficult to date women, especially in today's society.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like this rock and a hard place of,
Mm-hmm.
if they want to make a move on a girl, then they're seen as being too forward. If they don't make a move on a girl, they're seen as being a coward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of men feel stuck, and that's kind of the conversations when I've had conversations with them. That seems to be kind of the general thought. They just don't even know what to do at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always say, look to Saint Joseph. You can do no wrong in the way that he loved Mary. And if you can love a woman the way that he loved Mary, then you're on a good path.
Yeah. And he is a patron of the interior life. And I know John Paul II wrote beautifully about him in his document on Joseph. And and he talked about how you could, he doesn't say anything in Scripture, but you can feel like the weight or something, or the gravitas of his soul or something, that he takes these things to prayer. He has these dreams. The angels tell him what to do. That there's this real kind of pondering and trying to decide. The just man, like, he's trying to decide what is the right thing to do. He's pondering and thinking and following the Lord's inspiration. So you can just tell he has got like this developed interior life, right? To listen, to ask, and things. And there's something about that silence, that you can just tell a depth and a strength to him, that he's going to figure out the right thing and he's going to do it, right? And you think, he had to bring the Holy Family down to Bethlehem, then into Egypt, and then come back, and the whole time this murderous king lunatic's trying to kill the child. I mean, that's like real world. I mean, that's greater than real world stress. I mean, that's like a huge stress, that he's got this responsibility for, and he shoulders all that. Just to have a lunatic chasing you after you,
right,
and
right. And thinking about, I feel like Mary, she got to see the angel Gabriel and like had this experience, and it seems like her whole life was preparing her for it. And I'm sure it was similar to Saint Joseph, but it almost feels a little bit more like he was just thrust into this position and like, good luck, like, here you go. And obviously he was guided throughout it, but I just can't imagine that shock that must have been for him. And I think Mary, people would have just seen that virtue in her, and I'm sure it was very similar to Saint Joseph, but obviously Mary just has a different way about her with being the Immaculate Conception, that there was just like this preparation. And it just seems, St. Joseph was like, all right, here you go. Like, you're going to be able to do this. And God gave him the strength, and he was able to do it, and he was scared.
Yeah.
But yet he followed God's will anyways.
Right. That is a model for us. And I marvel, too, that, like, the angel's telling him. Like, the angel, I think it speaks to the role for men, too, of, responsibilities they have in the family and to provide, protect, and things. And the angel's not telling the Immaculate Conception. He's telling Joseph. This is his responsibility to do this stuff, and he's gifted or whatever talents to do it. I mean, it too, just to be a refugee, right, and try to provide for your family. And I guess it struck me the last couple of years too, just the stress of that. And everybody can relate to stress, and that he had a lot that he was dealing with, and. So.
Well, it's funny too. You bring up the stress, and yet there's like the sleeping images of Saint Joseph too. Like, he has a lot of these things that seem opposite to one another, like Saint Joseph the worker, but also the patron of sleep, like, or the patron of rest. Like he kind of has a little bit of everything. It seems that, and I think that's also too why I find it beneficial, and men find it beneficial to look to him, is you can pick out some of those qualities that you see in him that maybe you want to grow in a little bit more, things that you struggle with. And most likely there's a reflection or something that you can turn to in St. Joseph that might match that struggle that you're going through. Yeah,
and I think, he's got this exterior stress on him, but, he obviously did it, with peace, and was able to. There's that famous statue of him, or painting of him sleeping. I can't think of what.
I see a lot of statues in like gift shops.
Well,
I love a good Catholic gift shop, and I've seen a lot of sleeping St. Josephs.
Yeah, I
in
think
them
St.
before.
Francis had something on it, or Pope Francis had something on his desk about that. I don't know, it's an image of trust or something. But let's also, you mentioned the Eucharist and how you've grown in your devotion. And what was the saying? You mentioned it on the show. I can't remember what it was. You have like a Eucharistic-centered spiritual life.
The Eucharist is the bread and butter of my prayer
Yeah,
life.
the bread and butter of my prayer life. Yeah. Tell us about that. I mean, what does that look like? I mean, how would we say something here that would help maybe a young person to understand? Like, I remember I was born and raised Catholic, but I don't recall like growing up seeing like a benediction or anything like that. And I remember my father was sick in the hospital seriously, and I said, I told my mom, I said, I'm going to go pray in the church. And she said, well, there's an adoration chapel at our parish. And so I went, and I remember kneeling down in the chapel, but not really knowing what I was doing there, or what the Eucharist really was, or what is this idea of adoration, and what are we supposed to do? And how would you describe that to like a high schooler?
Yeah, well, during my talk, actually, I spend a lot on the Eucharist. Even though I'm a chastity speaker, I mean, the Eucharist, it's the physical body of Christ. And I think if we understand just the gravity of that body, of that love, that translates into our relationships. So I want to share a little bit about my testimony, maybe, of why the Eucharist has been such a big devotion to me, because I think it's definitely a unique perspective. And that's because, as I mentioned earlier with St. Rita, I started to face a lot of health challenges my freshman year of college. And that's really where my devotion to the Eucharist began, because that freshman year I was all of a sudden getting really tired, like sleeping 10 hours a night, getting up to go to my 8 a.m. class, coming back and taking another 2-hour-long nap and not even feeling awake after that. Really, really tired. I started losing my hair a little bit, I noticed. My body composition changed a lot. At the same time, I was still Miss Wisconsin's teen. So all of these like physical things were changing about me as well. And I was somewhat in the public eye with that, and just really, really struggling with both the image of myself, and didn't know what was happening to me. And also just struggling to, it's my freshman year of college. I want to be out there socializing, meeting people, and I didn't have the energy to do so. And so Mass became the kind of the safe place for me to go, because I didn't necessarily have the energy to want to sit in adoration for an hour. I'd probably fall asleep.
Right.
The Mass, at least I could stand and sit and kneel, and I just had to like listen. And I think sometimes too, when we're going through times of deep suffering, we don't want to think about things. Like, thinking just kind of makes us sad, right? And we need to pray. But for me, I was like, I don't want to sit and think. I just need to like sit and listen. And I could do that at Mass. And not only that was it just like a good pair for what I was going through, there's also the part of the Mass where the priest holds up the host and says, "This is my body given up for you." And so when I would go to Mass, I would hear those words of, "This is my body given up for you." And at that same time, when my body didn't feel like it was enough, like it wasn't functioning enough, I could take such comfort in knowing that Jesus was up there when I didn't feel like enough, like he was there, and his strength was there, and I could rely on that. And so I would go to Mass almost every single day as my way of prayer, to receive the Eucharist, to hear those words of like, "This is my body given up for you," and just take comfort that Jesus had me, that his body had me, that he was going to pull me through whatever I was going through. And then as my health condition has gotten a lot more manageable, made some lifestyle changes. But with those lifestyle changes, I had to kind of change my diet completely too, to try and help with some of these symptoms. And so one of those things includes taking gluten out of my diet. And I'm really particular with that to try and help. So I'm not able to receive even the host or the low gluten host. I have to receive the precious blood, which is really interesting, because during, right after COVID, we took out the precious blood at every single Mass. And there's been times that I've been traveling or been to a parish that wasn't my home parish, ask to receive the precious blood, and they just say, sorry, we don't do that here. Like, we can't help you. And so then when I go to Mass that day, I'm not able to receive the precious blood. And that was a really big struggle, actually, when I was studying abroad, because that was that year right after I started experiencing these health problems. I'd made all the lifestyle changes, and then I was going to all these churches that they didn't speak English, that like it was a lot to try and coordinate getting the precious blood, or even a low gluten host at that point. I just wanted to receive Jesus, and that really wasn't always an option there. And so throughout that experience of those times that I'd go to Mass and not be able to receive, I would go in, like even to this day, sometimes that will happen, and there's something different about that experience of not being able to receive Jesus. Like, you walk up, you get so close, and nothing that I've done on my own is preventing me from being able to receive him. It's just the circumstances. And then it's like I have to go back and sit in the pew, and there's like this, I've always tried to, I don't know how to put words to it because it's such a, in the moment, like, unique experience, but it's like my soul feels sorrowful. Like, it knows that there's something that's missing. But it's because of those moments that I like sit there in such sorrow that I know the joy of being able to receive Jesus when I am able to. And so between all of that, those last 4 years, that's where my love for the Eucharist has really grown, because I know what it's like to not receive Jesus, and I never want to be without him. And so then I know all the more joy when I am able to receive him, and I just have grown in this hunger to want to go to daily Mass, to want to go to adoration. And I'd love to, we can go into what to do at adoration, but I definitely wanted to just start off with that story of, that's maybe why I'm so devoted to the Eucharist, and also just encourage people that, you're not probably going to have that same story, but that Jesus sees us and he wants to be with us, and that's the greatest communion that we have with him. And I mean, it's this miracle that we can experience every single day if we make the dedication to go to Mass every single day, or even on Sunday. If we just go on Sundays, we get to still like be in union with God in the closest way that we have on earth, and we can't pass that up.
Are you able to receive the precious blood today now? I mean, like, after post-COVID? And
yes, I receive the precious blood when I go to Mass.
They do like a daily Mass, they would give you the precious blood.
Yes, usually I try and go to the same parish every day when I can. So then it's like the priest knows me, and even at my home parish, especially, my youngest brother is really good friends with the priest too. So between all those connections, it's also nice because then I get to talk to the priests a little bit more, at least, and they know who I am because I'm the special one who needs the precious blood. So there's been some good things that have come out of it, that I get to know maybe the priests a little bit better and see them. And then it also, I like to go to the same place and continue going there. And there's a sense of accountability, I think, then too, when it's like, okay, if I get in the habit, people will know if I'm gone.
And then what would you say about adoration? How would you describe that to the young people? That you said you had a lot of thoughts about that.
Besides it being the best thing that you could do. I mean, I always encourage that, because we need to put ourselves in places that are different than our day-to-day life, so that we can really reflect on the day-to-day life. In fact, I think that Eucharistic adoration is the only place that you face true reality, right? If you're before God, that's the deepest reality that you'll experience. So we need to put ourselves in that place to be able to be there. And sometimes we don't know what to think. Sometimes we don't know what to pray. But I think just being there, there's great graces that are offered there. There's a lot to share with God in that, even when we don't know what to say. Because it's an act of loving him. That's what our lives are meant to be oriented towards. And what better way to love him than sitting before him and allowing him to speak into your life. And so I would just encourage young people to just go. Like, just try it out. Even if you're a little nervous, you don't know what to say, like, just go. You don't have to go for a whole holy hour like the traditional practice is, but to just be there before Jesus, that's going to be different than anything than you're experiencing in the day-to-day life. And I just have noticed in my life, when I am consistently going to adoration, I feel so much more at peace, because it gives me a second to just like sit and contemplate and to learn about God and to learn about who made me. And if I want to know anything more about life and about myself, I have to go to the source, and that's God. So it's definitely a way to connect with reality.
And did someone teach you? I know you had that powerful experience on a retreat in high school that really focused you on Christ, but did someone explain to you, hey, adoration is a really good thing to do, or daily mass is a good thing to do, or?
I think it was just going Benedictine. I remember that freshman year, especially of college, because then 2,000 other young Catholics who were actually taking their faith seriously, I started to pick up on some of these habits that I never heard of before. Even though I went to a Catholic school growing up, it wasn't until I was in college studying theology, mind you, that I learned that daily mass only has the reading in the gospel, not two readings in a gospel. It's the little things like that I was missing a lot, the habits. And at Benedictine, they have 24/7 hour adoration, and then they also had another chapel that was right across literally across the street from the dorm that I was in, and you could sign up for a time slot to do adoration there. So I had signed up for a time slot at adoration once a week to do that.
And that's
that kind of
mostly
introduced
the students.
me. That's all students.
It's all students.
All students. And then they also have 3 daily masses at Benedictine.
Wow.
So between those easy availability, it was just a part of college life.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, very unique experience. I know that is not most people's college experience, but I'm very grateful that was my experience in college.
Well, funny you mentioned that, because I went to a state college in Colorado, and they had a Newman Center on campus, and we'd have mass there. I don't remember if it was every week, but since that time, though, Focus, this is in Golden, outside of Denver, so it's real close to Focus and all this, and they have just on the edge of campus, I guess it's technically off campus, but they had some of the missionaries were living, and they had an adoration chapel there. And I remember I just couldn't get my head around it. My experience being at that school, I forgot when I visited. I guess that was right before COVID, I think. And so I was there like 30 years before or something. It was like, I can't imagine, having the Eucharist on campus today. It just made me think a moment about, wow, what a different college experience. Just to draw that strength from the Eucharist, to get through college, to get through guidance and stuff. And when I was there, we were really focused on academics and everything, but it was a difficult time, just the pressures. And my father got sick during that time and passed away. But
sorry.
it was just it just felt like it changed everything. I said, this is like a different place than when I went to school, to have missionaries there in this. But
oh, definitely. Yes, there's a lot that's being put in place, I think, for college age students, because it's the first time that you're on your own. You're not responsible to your parents. You're not graduated and then eventually responsible to have a job, responsible for a spouse or kids.
Right,
I mean, you're on your own for a little bit, and it's the first time. And I'm very grateful that I was at Benedictine, that I could just see the other people my age taking their faith seriously and learn from them. I got my degree in theology, but I think I learned so much just from watching and observing people my age doing that. And it's like, oh, okay, like this is actually something that we should be doing, and just seeing how joyful that they were.
Yeah. And how would you tell somebody, like, how do you like to pray? What's worked for you, or what are some techniques, tips, whatever that you do in prayer?
When I go to adoration, I found if you have difficulty focusing in mass or at adoration, go more often. It sounds like opposite almost, but I found that when you get in the practice of just being quiet more often, you're going to be able to focus better when you need to. So if you're having trouble focus, go more often. And then when you do go, I like to pray. It's similar to Saint Teresa of Avila, is who I draw this from. She was said to never go to adoration without something to read. And you don't want to sit there and read a book to Jesus. That's not the point. But you should read until something strikes you. And then you can think about that thing that's striking you. And bringing a spiritual book, of course,
Right.
something that's going
Right.
to teach you a little bit more about God.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that personally to be very helpful, because then I'm not thinking about myself. It's I have this reading, and I'm thinking about the reading, and the reading's about God, so it makes me think about God in a different way. So I found that to be really helpful. But honestly, too, just sitting and thinking for a little bit is honestly what I do. A good bit of the time is just to sit and think about maybe memories that are popping up, emotions that I'm feeling, but talk through them with Jesus. So not to sit there and just think for the sake of thinking, like sitting there and really bringing Jesus into the things that I'm going through, the things, the day-to-day moments, thinking about how I'm loving people that day, you know, what I can do better with him, and just taking the time to be with him. I think he'll reveal that. And if you're struggling to love prayer, to like prayer, we can pray for that desire to want to pray. Like ask God for the desire to do it, ask God for the direction to do it, because I think too, people aren't going to resonate in the same way that I do with certain prayers. Some people really benefit from listening to music and praying. So like praying with worship music or over lyrics from worship music songs. So I've heard other people find that helpful. That's not necessarily helpful to me, but different people find these different ways to pray. And I think there's a way of prayer that's going to really enliven each person's heart, but that takes some time to figure out. So just to be patient with yourself, to try out different things, whether that's reading a spiritual book, bringing scripture to read. Maybe that's instead of listening to whatever music you're going to listen to in the car, instead listening to worship music or listening to a Catholic podcast. I love personally listening to podcasts and learning that way. It's like you're already in the car, so might as well. Or you can bring your rosary with you, learn the Divine Mercy Chaplet. Divine Mercy Chaplet's great for busy people because it takes like 5 minutes and it's a very powerful prayer. So there's a lot of different ways that we can look to love God better.
And too, I guess spiritual writers too talk about, well, even like the instruction of the church. I think it was for cloistered nuns to be careful with the media they ingest. You know, that if we, if like maybe we're watching something on television that's super stimulating, and then all of a sudden you're asking me to be quiet and to focus in the silent room towards, just the Eucharist. It's like, that's a big jump, right? To have to hold our attention. Because I feel like today, it's like the movies and stuff, they like come out of the TV and shake you, right? It's kind of like our food, a lot of sugar and salt that stimulates you, and but it can leave you empty and stuff. But I guess our culture and stuff, it doesn't give us that like contemplative stance, that kind of to be able to receive our Lord. What about the rosary? Some people have trouble saying it's too repetitive, it's boring. What do you tell young people about the rosary?
Yeah, so I try to pray my rosary almost every day. I don't necessarily like the rosary, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's not one of my favorite prayers to pray, but I know that Mary has asked us to do it. In fact, she's come time and time again and asked us to pray the rosary. Yeah. And if Mary's will is perfectly aligned with the Lord's will, that means that it's also Jesus' will for us to pray the rosary every single day.
Right.
So sometimes we have to do things that we don't like to do. And even if you find it repetitive, it's a sacrifice for God. I mean, you really have to, that's, 15 to 30 minutes that you have to do something that maybe it's not your favorite way to pray, but it's a good sacrifice for God. And also it's a means of contemplating the life of Christ. So you can never do wrong when you're contemplating the life of Christ. Yeah. And there's also virtues associated with the rosary. So if someone needs maybe a new way of looking at the rosary, to look to the virtues of the rosary, think about each mystery is dedicated to a specific virtue. So maybe thinking and contemplating that virtue during that decade. We also have intentions that we can bring before Mary. So thinking about those intentions and what you can learn about that intention, looking at whatever mystery you're reflecting on. Especially, I think with the sorrowful mystery, something that I always like to think about if I'm bringing a specific intention is like, where in the Passion is this suffering right now, or
Yeah.
where in the passion is this intention? Because ultimately the goal is to bring this intention to the crucifixion. And what I mean by that is like get it to the point where it's all in God's hands, that it's like completed, it's ready for God to just take over and do his will, to accomplish God's will. That's the goal of any intention, is to get it to the point where you've accomplished God's will. But for us to get to that point, there's a lot of prayer and a lot of sacrifice that needs to go along the way. So sometimes I like to think about, like, if I'm thinking about a struggle, especially with my health, it's like, okay, am I in the agony in the garden right now, where I'm just kind of thinking about it and I'm just anticipating it, and I'm not quite doing anything about it, maybe not quite ready to give it up? Or am I starting to make my way through the walk with Jesus, that eventually I'm going to be able to make it to the point where it's like, okay, God, I can truly say that this is in your hands. So that's also something to think about and bring to prayer.
Yeah, never thought of that. That is a good, to progress in those mysteries, right? In union.
Right, and it's, I mean, every person's, you're going to think of something different's going to touch you, and maybe that's just, you can also read different meditations on the rosary, kind of switch it up so it's not quite as repetitive, but I think it's also meant to be repetitive enough that it's second nature to us, that we can pray it and think about it and hopefully do it every single day.
Yeah, and I like to think of it too. I've fallen in love. It was a number of years ago. I was in Rome and I wanted to get some image of Mary to bring home with me. And I went to these, Rome's known for their nice art workshops. And I wanted to find this image of praying Mary. You often see her with the child Jesus and things. And I remember it was kind of in a pseudo icon style, but not really. And she has her hands like apart. And there's a term in the icon world for that image of Mary, and I forgot what it is, but it's basically like her as an intercessor. And I was recently on a Footprints of St. Paul trip, and I was really attuned to those images. And we're in all these Greek Orthodox monasteries, and there's all over the place. In fact, Pope Benedict, he sent one of these images. It was a modern icon, but it was that image of Mary to the house of Mary in Ephesus, where I believe that she lived in Ephesus. But anyway, I think of her too just as interceding for us, and strengthening our prayers. That now Mary's praying for me in a powerful way, and she can obtain things for me that my prayers can't obtain, right, on my own. And she is, I go for a bike ride. I got a bicycle, and I go out, and as you get older, you realize how easy it would be to get hurt out there, traffic and all this kind of stuff. And I used to just pray like a guardian angel prayer. But then this is some years ago, I just said, mothers are very worried about you when you're in danger and doing stuff. And so I started praying the guardian angel plus 2 Hail Marys, to keep me safe on this bicycle.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I feel like she's always been like, anytime I'm like scared or something, it's always like you whip out the Hail Mary. But I think is so sweet about Mary's intercession in the rosary is, especially thinking about what you were just saying, adoration. It's like I sit in adoration, I look at Jesus. Like he's always like in front of me and praying to him. And something with Our Lady, it's almost like when you pray the rosary, it's like she's sitting right next to you, praying it with you to Jesus. It's just kind of the imagery of like, okay, Jesus is in front of me, and now it's like Mary's beside me praying it with me, and she's going to help bring this intention to her son.
And some very good high-level Mariologists look at her intercession that way. Like we speak of her as a mediation of all graces, and some theologians look at it as she's helping us to open our hearts to receive those graces. Like that's like a role. And you think about, that kind of resonated with me, because I think, mothers really help shape the hearts of their children. They kind of communicate. Dad's telling you got to get good grades, you got to go to school, you got to work, you got to. But the mother's really worried about your heart, right? Do you have the right feelings? Do you have a heart for people that are isolated or wallflowers or whatever? And so and she's interceding for us that we may have that open heart, that soft heart, that not hearts of stone but hearts of flesh, and so. Yeah, just one other thing. With Our Lady, and I wanted to, this is a good question relating to Our Lady of Champion.
My favorite.
Yeah. So that's right outside of Green Bay. You grew up in
Mm-hmm.
Green Bay area, and you're a Champion, right? Or yeah.
Yes.
And I went there a couple of years ago, and the upper church is beautiful. I mean, it's like really nice. But I went down to the original chapel, where she's.
Yeah, the oratory.
Yeah, and I just remember having this sense of like the tenderness of Our Lady, that there's just some kind of presence of her that was so motherly and tender. Because right after that, I went to Poland. I went to Częstochowa.
Wow.
And it was like, they say, John Paul would say this, that this is the spiritual heart of Poland, right? Like the whole country over time will make pilgrimages here. And you learn about their history, how they suffered the couple of 2 or 3 partitions, and Nazis and Russians and all this stuff.
Right.
Like they're going there for strength. And that's what I felt there. So I was able to pray in front of the image of Our Lady of Częstochowa, and it was like, you feel like these Polish people are tough. They endured a lot, and I just felt like she is a source of strength. And it was only fairly recently I've thought more about the strength of Our Lady, and I forget the litany has references to that, but she is a valiant woman, right? And there's a strength to her, and she can help you to be strong, right? Right. But anyway, tell us about Champion. What do you love? What's your experience?
Well, it's funny. As you mentioned, I grew up less than an hour away from Our Lady of Champion. So I grew up thinking everyone had a Marian apparition in their backyard.
And this is the only
That's
approved.
So true. It's the only approved Marian apparition in the United States, located in farm area, Wisconsin,
beautiful
middle of
farm
nowhere.
Yes.
Yes. But yeah, in the middle of nowhere, and it's amazing to know how Our Lady is taking care of us, and even in the United States. But Our Lady of Champion appeared to Adele Bryce in 1858, I believe, and she appeared to her on 3 separate occasions. And the first 2 times, she was silent. Adele was just walking on her way to Mass, and she had just immigrated from Belgium. And in Belgium, they were told that, the United States of America, this land of abundance, this land of, they were just going to experience so much more. Like, they'd have land and agriculture and all this stuff. And they immigrated to Wisconsin. These harsh winters, they were not prepared for. These conditions that they weren't told were going to be part of the deal of moving to this great America. And so they were really suffering. And Adele, she would have to walk miles and miles and miles to Mass. And on the 3rd time that she was walking to and from Mass, saw Our Lady dressed in white, and she asked her who she was. She had asked her priest for advice before this. Like, I keep seeing this lady. She thought it was a suffering soul in purgatory who needed prayer, something like that. And she asked Our Lady who she was, and she said that she was the Queen of Heaven. And she told Adele that it was great that she received communion that day at Mass, but that she must do more. She must offer up her prayers and her communion for the conversion of sinners. And then she also encouraged her to go and teach the children of the wild country, is what she called it, because it really was the wild country at that point. And to this day,
there's a certain wildness.
Yeah, there is. It definitely still is. And
they like their beer and brats, right?
Beer and brats, that's very, very true. So it still is a little wild, just in a very different way, I think, than what Our Lady initially intended. And Adele was there like, what do you mean you want me to go and teach these children? It's thought that Adele didn't even know how to sign her name. She was essentially illiterate, and didn't have any education. And Our Lady told her to go teach them the sign of the cross and to teach them their catechism and really go from there. And she said to go and fear nothing, that Our Lady would be with her. And so then from there, Adele would walk a 50-mile radius from her home, go and offer to clean people's houses so that she could teach the children their catechism, because otherwise the children had to do the chores. So Adele did the chores for them so that they could learn their catechism. Wow. And eventually Adele's father built a chapel where the apparition happened, and it became a great devotion to the Belgian people in that area. They would always go there and seek comfort from Our Lady of Champion. They called it Our Lady of Good Help at that time, which is a Belgian devotion. And ever since, I mean, it's grown to be a large church. There's something that's always being developed. In 2010, it was declared a Marian apparition. It was an approved Marian apparition by the Catholic Church. And there's been many miracles that have happened there, miracles from Adele's time to even miracles that are happening today. I've met people who have experienced miracles at Our Lady of Champion. Most notably is the Peshtigo fire, which the Peshtigo fire happened during Adele's time when they had built an orphanage or a schoolhouse and a chapel on this property. And the Peshtigo fire happened the same night as the Chicago fire. It was worse than the Chicago fire, killed more people, damaged more land than the Chicago fire, but got no media attention because of Chicago being a larger city, so no one really had heard about it. And because this fire was so bad, people didn't know where to go, so pilgrims and people in the area, they flocked to this Marian apparition site, hoping that that would save them. And in an act of faith, Adele took all these people and they walked the fence area of the Marian apparition site in the schoolhouse that they were at. They walked this white fence area that they had outside and did a rosary procession, and everyone who fled there was safe from this fire. Like this deadly fire that killed more people even than the Chicago fire had. And they were safe just going to this Marian apparition. And the next day, so this fire happened October 8th. On October 9th, after having this terrible drought that caused the fire in the first place, the rains came. October 9th is also the feast day and the anniversary of Our Lady of Champion, the day that Our Lady appeared to Adele.
That's October 9th.
That the fires were put out by this miraculous rain.
Wow.
So, and there's many more stories I know with that, but I'll leave it there. It's an incredible place. People, the general thought is that peace that you experience while you're there, that tenderness, I think, is really a main message of Our Lady of Champion.
And the message is a call to educate the youth, right? And so she was associated or started an order, right, to do that. And didn't they have like a boarding school or something?
Yes, it was an order of lay women that educated.
Okay.
Yes, that area, which is really amazing to think about. But that this uneducated woman was able to leave this impact, and now her cause for canonization is being opened up, which is very exciting. And the shrine continues to develop, which is a really interesting to think about in itself because it happened in the 1800s. Yeah. This apparition, and it wasn't until more recently that it started kind of gaining some traction, and it just makes you wonder, like, what's Our Lady's plan behind that? That it took so long to be approved in this way and be recognized in this way, and it's church approved, like it's a legitimate Marian apparition, and that's one of my main questions I want to ask God someday. Is just like, okay, why did this devotion not really spark until later? Because it's really beautiful.
And I've been up to Wisconsin a couple times recently, and I was struck by the friendliness of the people. It's different than like some of the other German areas to me. It had kind of more of a warmth to it, and but also a lot of holy places.
Yes.
You have like Holy Hill, right?
Holy Hill, Our Lady of Guadalupe, that was built by Cardinal Burke, and then Our Lady of Champion.
Yeah, and then I went downtown to the Basilica of St. Josaphat. Have you been in Milwaukee?
I haven't been, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, you got to go there. I think it's really one of the most beautiful churches I've ever been to in America.
Really?
It is.
I've heard it mentioned a couple times in the last literally month or so. So I think God is probably inviting me to go, and I just need to make the trip.
Yeah, I was there, and it was in the kind of mid-morning, and the sun, just the stained glass was just brilliant, and it's just all over the place. It's like, I was blown away by that. So a lot of great things going on in Wisconsin. And also, let's talk about, Holy Hill, that's Our Lady of Good Counsel, right? Is that or?
I think so. That I'm not quite as familiar with that shrine.
Okay.
It's about 2 hours away from where I grew up.
Yeah.
I've been a couple of times, and it's also a beautiful chapel.
Yeah.
Actually, I was just there this last fall for during college. We had a fall break, and my parents hadn't been to Holy Hill in a while. So for this fall break, we just drove down for the day. And it just so happened while I was there, I ran into the president of Benedictine College.
Oh, really?
He was on our fall break. Him and his wife, President Minnis and Mrs. Minnis, were there, which it was just a funny moment that we were walking through. They had this Shroud of Turin exhibit. And as we walked through, I turned and I was like, is that President Minnis? like he's a celebrity on our campus, he's the president. Everyone loves President Minnis. And sure enough, it was. And we knew each other from Benedictine. And they were actually on my podcast with the Everyday Saint. I got to ask them about their faith journey and how they ended up being the presidents of Benedictine College and really found their faith. But it was just a funny moment that they were there all the way from Kansas visiting during the same fall break.
Well, let's wrap this up a little bit about kind of wanted to talk about your work with youth and chastity, and I'd be interested to hear like what are they hungry for? What kind of does appeal to them about the gospel's message of chastity, the call of chastity? What do they grab hold of? What excites them? And maybe some of the greatest challenges they have that you see. I know you're a good observer of things.
Yes, I think when you present the truth to anyone, there's something attractive about it. Something that I've taken to notice, there's the three transcendentals: beauty, goodness, and truth. And so when I'm giving this talk, I first kind of present the beauty of life, the beauty of the human person, this respect for self. So we start there, and once we kind of can see this beauty, that's the easiest thing I think for humans to grasp is beauty. And then we turn to the goodness of it, the goodness of making this decision, even though it can be difficult, it can be countercultural, yet it's something that's very good. And there's a lot of benefits to it. It's something I even explain. I have 7 non-religious reasons why you should save intimacy for marriage. Just like even bringing God out of it, like practically, this makes sense. And I explained to them that in all the thousands of teens that I've talked to and all the hours that I've spent thinking and contemplating this topic, I've never come up with a good reason to have intimacy outside of marriage. Like, there's not a good reason because, and that's the truth. The truth part of it is that once we understand this respect of self, this respect of others, we can come to know the truth. And that's that God designed intimacy only for marriage. And that's because, not because it's bad, but because we're so good, because God made us so good. And I think that's definitely a message that I try to convey to them is I don't want to paint God as just like this condemning God that, just wants us to suffer and to...
A God of no's.
Yeah, a God who doesn't want us to eat meat and fast all the time, There's also this mercy, and that's a big point that I drive home with them is God's mercies are new every morning, that they can always go to confession and begin again. And I think that's really helpful just off the bat to explain that to them. And most of the time when I'm, I'd love to share this story with you because I think this story kind of maybe paints the picture for a lot of interactions that I've had with the teens. There was a talk that I gave a couple months ago in South Carolina where while I was giving the talk, I could tell that there was kind of a troubled teen. You could kind of tell just that there might be something going on. And I didn't know this while I was giving the presentation, but she actually asked the coordinator if she could leave about halfway through the presentation. She mentioned that it was kind of she was like, this is kind of weird, kind of a weird topic. Like, I'm a little uncomfortable. Can I go? And the youth minister was like, well, if you're uncomfortable with this topic, you should go and sit back down, actually. And so she did. And I didn't realize that was the conversation that they had until afterwards. But at the end of my presentation, I always invite the kids to come and talk to me after. That's one of my favorite parts. Is it's like, whether you have a question or not, I love to just talk with you. I usually come up with a question of okay, if you don't even know what to say to me, but you want to come talk to me, answer this question. I give them a way to come and talk to me afterwards too, because I'd love to just talk with them, but also
That's
offer.
the feminine genius.
Yeah. There you go, exactly. And I always offer, if you have questions, love to answer them. Well, before I'm even off the stage, this girl runs up on the stage. She sits on the corner, and I'm sitting there like gathering my things, and she sits down. She goes, "I have so many questions," and I was like, "Okay, like I'm ready to answer." And she asked a lot about LGBT problems, a lot about broken families, broken homes, and I explained these things to her from a Catholic perspective, and that all this is oriented towards like what is love, what does God design love to be. I mean, I had just finished the presentation, so there's a lot of points I could build off of there. And what she said after I was kind of explaining it, she was probably about 14 years old, I'd say. And she said, well, I ask because I've always said that I'm this in like the LGBT community, but I'm kind of young actually. I don't know if maybe that's not what I am. Like I'm kind of young. Maybe I don't know that yet. Right. And I was like, yeah. And you know what? Like boys are kind of weird at your age, right? Like it's okay to like not necessarily like go after a relationship right now. Maybe you haven't met the right person, and that's okay to be patient. She's like, yeah. And she kind of alluded then in this conversation to maybe some wounds from her past, and sometimes she's maybe taken advantage of in her youth. And she was like, I always give out these commitment cards at the end that they can sign it and date it and make a promise of chastity and hold on to that card and hopefully motivate them to really live out that virtue and remember the talk. And she said, I grabbed one of your cards, and this is the first time like in a long time that I've known that my body is good, like that I'm good. Yeah. And that has stuck with me for a long time, because she went to, you could see how troubled she was before the talk, and she was literally like bouncing with joy by the end of this, because she's like, I get it, like God loves me, like God made me good, and just because of the circumstances that she'd been in when she was younger, she didn't know that. And
that's
I think
amazing. She connected. I mean, most people struggle with believing that God loves them and that they're good, like the whole of their life, right? Do you remember what you said, like the examples you gave?
Great question. I don't, and maybe it was like she didn't necessarily pick out anything in particular from the talk that I can pinpoint. I spend a lot of my presentation talking about identity, about just that self-respect, that we're made good, that we're made to love well, and that we deserve that love, that we're worth that value. And then I really go into chastity, because if you don't have a respect of self, this chastity thing is not going to make sense. Right. So I have to spend a lot of time in my thought and opinion on that topic. So I don't know if that's what touched her, or if it was just, the idea that relationships aren't the end all be all either. Like we have this relationship with God that comes first and foremost. And I think sometimes the problem, especially with the LGBT ideologies, is that seems to be the main focus of their life. And I wonder, maybe this was just an opportunity where she all of a sudden took the attention off of a relationship with other people and put that attention back on God. And once that's first, the rest of it makes sense. Yeah, that's a great point. I know Father John Harvey started Courage. He talked about that identity, that we're children of God, and that we're human persons, maybe with the same sex attraction or something, or heterosexual orientation, I guess. And but that comes after your identity as a child of God, or dignity of a human person, image and likeness of God. We don't define us by a sexual. That's not all consuming explanation of who we are, or the most fundamental thing we say. And I never forgot that. But that's a great point to make, that because I think that's something I just see. I mean, sexuality is so emphasized today, and the end all and be all of everything. And Father Groeschel used to tell us. Do you remember Father Groeschel? This might be before your time. He was a big personality on the network, and he's passed away. He was a Franciscan, and he'd say, he said, I'd ride the subway in New York all the time. He lived in New York. He said, a lot of these people are having active sex lives. They don't look that happy to me, just automatic, just because of that. We're made to have for a deeper fulfillment, right? And I love something too that John Paul II, in his theology embodied, what he talked about, that the conjugal act gives flesh to the vows. Like you make this commitment, this expression of love.
and it fosters that union and everything, the one flesh union. But there's something that precedes it that, if it's not there, this powerful, beautiful thing can be distorted, outside of marriage. And I know hearing confessions, sometimes you really get a sense of that, like with young people. It's like, you're not ready for this. You're doing things, and it's just going to tear you up. And so, well, that's a great, beautiful message, and you get good response from your audiences and stuff.
I do, yeah. This last spring was really the first time that I was able to make this, full time. I had been in college before that, so I really couldn't. And so this spring was the first time that I was able to, that this was my job, was going and speaking. And you don't always know how it's going to take, especially all over the country. I mean, there's even state to state, there's different cultures, and you never know what their background is, what their experience and education is on theology of the body. I think that's something that needs to be developed more a little bit in our church, because it is so confusing, and it's also hard to keep up with. Like it seems like there's always something new about it, but there's some core fundamental truths I think that these teens need to be reminded of. A lot of identity, a lot of just reminders that they're good, that they're here for a purpose and a mission, and I think they forget that when they're that young. And especially, I mean, my ministry is called the Everyday Saint, so I always leave this talk with encouraging them, like, you have the capacity for sainthood, like you have the capacity to live an extraordinary life. But you have to take these ordinary things, these things that seem ordinary, seem normal, and make it extraordinary. And that involves sacrifice, because it is a sacrifice to save intimacy for marriage. There's no doubt about it. And I don't want to sugarcoat it with them. Like, it is difficult, especially if they get into serious relationships, or if they see their friends making different decisions. They're going to be judged for it. But I mean, you're worth it, right? Like you're valuable. And as we were just saying, if your identity is in God, you recognize just how good He made all of us. And going back even to the Eucharist, like, His body means something to us. And if Jesus' body means so much to us that it's literally like the summit of our faith, that means that our bodies also have to mean something. For that to hold that same weight, our bodies also have to mean something and communicate something as well. So we have to understand just how good we are in the eyes of God. And I think that's a lot of girls come up afterwards and just are so touched. And even a couple times where I've been invited to do like a prayer ministry afterwards, or they'll do like adoration and prayer after. And there's been a lot of girls who come up asking for prayers, like feeling like they don't fit in with their friend group, feeling like they feel really lost, that there's just not a sense of purpose. They haven't found their people. They don't know, what to do, who they want to be yet. And it's like sources of deep wounds. Like, I remember feeling that in high school too, like not fitting in, and we kind of brush past those things, I think, as we get older. Like, oh, we'll deal with it. Like, it's okay. Like, just be yourselves. But these are like serious wounds that you face as high school students. And I think we struggle with it a lot of our lives, of figuring out who we are. And if you're not taking the time to like really found that on God, nothing else will make sense.
And you just reminded me too, like, I mean, again, the greatness of the Christian message that, well, I'm thinking right now I remember hearing this Catholic woman. She was a journalist, a serious news person, in the big networks and stuff. And she was raised Catholic, and she was talking about her upbringing, like in the 50s. She's passed away, but she said the nuns at she went to a good school in New Orleans, and she said they took women seriously, to educate them, and they give them this first-rate education and stuff. And I'm thinking, like, the whole movement of Christianity too, it begins like with Mary, right? That she says yes. Like the world, St. Bernard of Clairvaux famously said, the world awaits the Virgin's response. What is she going to tell the angel? That she's going to remain a virgin, become a mother. And as we talked about before, I think the whole consecrated life, you're saying, are these women, they're just not reduced to sexuality or to their biological ability to have children. It's like Jesus wants to have this special relationship for who they are in themselves. They have this great value and dignity. and really, the church exalts, women religious as being a special image of the church as bride and this union that we're all called to have. It's like they are giving us example of that in a preeminent way. And so to me, it just shouts that God loves you. You have this incredible dignity.
Yes.
He wants to be united to you, right? And that is primary before everything else. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think women just have been lied to a lot, just by the culture that doesn't matter. And like what happened, like if we don't recognize how valuable we are, like what does life matter? What, I don't know. I don't understand how the culture has been able to really lie to women in such a deep way that's left us kind of scrambling for like what it even means to experience that like authentic femininity and that dignity and recognize it, because I don't think our culture sees that and sees that as something that's good. But that's something that I think I saw that a lot in high school, like on media, just like these lies that being told from women, like it's okay to like, sleep around with a bunch of guys or like make these decisions, dress immodestly, talk crudely, like those are normal things, and that's all a lie. Like that's not what defines a woman. And I think that's kind of what the culture has tried to make womanhood be.
Right. And just one more thing. I just read this fascinating stat about like these young adults entering the church. Like there's more men, young men.
I've seen that. I've seen that too. Yeah.
And I kind of felt, I think Fulton Sheen talked about the way of the woman is the way of the culture. Like they have this great influence. And again, I mean, I see it as like a special role women have, I think, is to model the church as bride, to model holiness, to model discipleship, to model surrender to God. It's like this loftiest virtues of our faith. But I also think, men have this role of leadership, that they have so much to say, and their actions or whatever drive the culture. And it's like, if they're not inspired, if they're not going right, women and children suffer first, before the men kind of, quote unquote, get what they want, and it's not really good for them, but they're kind of prospering in a worldly sense. And the women are left with the children by single parenthood or diseases or whatever, abortion stuff. And so I think it just gave me such hope to see some men rising up. And the numbers, I guess, are paltry if you look at the whole culture, But I think if the men don't do it, there's something that's not there that ought to be there. There's a loss that, some extraordinary women can step in and do leadership stuff like this. But it's like, men maybe have this role and this gifting, and God, I even think, God will use in the natural order, like he gives a special authority or grace to certain roles for women and men. And if they're not saying yes, it might not be getting done. There's going to be people suffering, right? If people aren't saying yes. And these men, if they don't step up, I don't know fully what it's going to look like, because men have done so much damage in history. But anyway, they have to be part of the solution, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And they have their role to play in Christianizing, humanizing, making this a civilization of love, a city of God. Men have their role to play. And so...
Yeah. Mary wasn't a single mom. She needed St. Joseph.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Eve Rosemary, for talking with us. And you've put in a long day's labor today.
Oh, it's been really wonderful. Thank you for having me.